Long ago, in a small village nestled between lush hills and flowing rivers, there lived a poor beggar named Kofi. His clothes were ragged, his body thin from hunger, and his days were spent wandering the village streets, hoping for a coin or some food to keep him alive. Yet, despite his suffering, Kofi always wore a gentle smile. He never cursed his fate or resented the world. The villagers often said, "The beggar's heart is rich, though his hands are empty," for Kofi had a spirit that radiated kindness. The village, though small, was filled with life. The sounds of children playing, the rhythmic beat of drums during festivals, and the laughter of elders around the fire pit were ever present. But for Kofi, all these joys seemed distant, as though they belonged to another world, a world he could never touch. His home was a small hut made of reeds and mud, far from the bustling center of the village, where the wealthy merchants lived. He survived by doing small favors for others, cleaning houses, fetching water, and telling stories of his ancestors, which brought him a small coin here and there. Though he had little, he gave everything with a generous heart. "What I have, I share," he would say with a smile. One day, as Kofi sat on the worn path leading into the village, an unusual sight caught his eye. A carriage, unlike anything he had ever seen, rolled down the dusty road. Its wheels were gilded, its horses fine and strong, and the driver wore a suit of fine linen. The villagers stood in awe as the carriage came to a halt before them, its presence a rare spectacle in a place where wealth was scarce. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man dressed in a suit so fine it seemed to sparkle in the sun. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the village with a mixture of curiosity and detachment. He was a man of high status, an outsider, yet he seemed to have no sense of the world he had entered. The villagers whispered among themselves, "Who is this man? What brings him to our humble village?" they asked, but no one knew the answer. The stranger, however, approached Kofi. He had noticed the beggar sitting quietly by the roadside, as he had seen many others in the village. But there was something different about Kofi. His eyes were not filled with desperation, but with a peaceful acceptance. His smile was genuine, though it carried the weight of many years of hardship. "Old man," he said, his voice calm but authoritative, "why do you sit here alone with nothing but your rags? The world is full of opportunities. Why do you not seek a better life?" Kofi looked up at him, his eyes bright yet calm. "I have no need for riches, my friend. My heart is full, even if my hands are empty. I live as I have lived, and I share with others as much as I can. What is the value of wealth if one cannot share it with others?" The man, surprised by the beggar's words, paused. There was something in Kofi's eyes, something that spoke of a wisdom that money could never buy. The stranger's expression softened. "You are wise beyond your years," he said, after a long pause. "I am a businessman, a man of fortune, but I have learned that wealth is not enough to fill the heart. I travel the world seeking answers to the questions that no one has been able to answer for me, and perhaps you may have the answer I seek." Kofi smiled, his eyes twinkling with a knowledge that had been passed down through generations. "You seek what the heart cannot buy, my friend. The answer you seek is not in gold or silver, but in understanding that true wealth lies not in what you possess, but in what you give." The stranger was taken aback. He had expected to hear a story of hardship, a plea for help, but instead he had encountered a man who was content with his life, despite having nothing by the world's standards. The businessman stood up, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "I am not a man to take words lightly. Perhaps you could help me in a way that no one else can. I am in need of someone with wisdom, someone who understands the deeper truths of life. I would like to offer you something in return for your wisdom." Kofi, though puzzled by the stranger's words, nodded. "What you offer matters little to me, but I will listen." The businessman, with a gleam in his eye, smiled and said, "I want to offer you wealth, money, land, anything you wish, for I believe that your wisdom is something the world needs. Will you accept my offer?" Kofi looked at him, his gaze steady. He knew that the stranger did not fully understand the depth of his words, nor did he grasp the true meaning of what Kofi had shared. Yet something in him told him that this man's offer was not one to be dismissed lightly. "I do not seek riches, my friend," Kofi said, his voice calm yet resolute. "But I will go with you if it is wisdom you seek." And so, with the weight of the world's riches on his shoulders, Kofi stood up and followed the businessman, unaware of the dramatic turn his life was about to take. Little did he know, this meeting would change not only his life, but the lives of those around him forever. As Kofi followed the businessman, the village behind him seemed to grow smaller, the sounds of children laughing and drums beating fading into the distance. The air grew thicker, the earth beneath his feet becoming firmer as they entered the vast stretch of land the stranger owned. The businessman's estate was impressive. Fields of green stretched as far as the eye could see, and grand houses stood tall like sentinels of wealth. It was a world Kofi had never known, a world of abundance, power, and material success. They arrived at the mansion, its marble pillars glistening in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by lush gardens that seemed to bloom endlessly. Kofi was offered a room in one of the mansion's wings, a stark contrast to the simple hut he had called home for so long. The bed was soft, the air fresh, and the food plentiful. Yet despite all the luxury surrounding him, Kofi's heart felt strangely empty. There was an unfamiliar discomfort that gnawed at him. The businessman, whose name was Amari, showed Kofi around the estate with great pride. "This is where I build my empire," Amari said, his voice full of self-importance. "These lands, this house, these treasures, all of it is mine, and soon it will be yours as well. All you need to do is embrace this world of wealth, and you will never want for anything again." Kofi, however, did not share the same excitement. He had never been one to place value on material things, yet he was a guest in Amari's world, and so he played along, nodding politely as they walked through the gardens. As they passed a group of workers tending to the fields, Kofi noticed something strange. Despite the abundance of the estate, the workers appeared tired, their faces worn with fatigue. There was no joy in their labor, no song or laughter. They worked as if under a heavy weight, their movements mechanical, as if driven by an unseen force. Kofi's sharp eyes caught every detail, and a small feeling of unease settled in his chest. Later that evening, Amari invited Kofi to dinner in the grand hall. The table was laden with food, dishes from all over the world, fruits that Kofi had never seen, and wine that shimmered like rubies. But as the evening wore on, Kofi's unease grew. Amari, who had been full of words earlier, now sat in silence, his eyes glinting with something Kofi could not quite place. It was as if a part of the man's soul was missing, and Kofi wondered whether this wealth had come at a price. Finally, after a long pause, Amari spoke. "Kofi, I have brought you here not just to offer you riches, but to show you the path to true power. You see, I am not like other men. I have made deals with spirits, with forces beyond this world to ensure my success. I have tapped into the ancient magic of our land, and it has made me what I am today. But there is something I cannot do alone. I need your wisdom, the kind that comes from a pure heart, something money cannot buy. If you will guide me, I promise you, you will have all that your heart desires." Kofi looked at Amari, his eyes narrowing slightly. There was something unsettling about the man's words. A chill ran down his spine. This was no ordinary offer. This was something far darker. Kofi's spirit, unshaken by the promises of wealth, felt the weight of the request. But he also knew that a part of him could not walk away from this. There was something in Amari's quest that called to him, something he could not ignore. "I will help you, Amari," Kofi said, his voice steady but filled with caution. "I will not do so for riches or power. I will help you because I see a great imbalance in your heart, a balance that no amount of wealth can fix." Amari's eyes lit up. "Then you understand. You understand that there is a magic to this world that goes beyond what we see. I have the power to make the world bend to my will, but I need your wisdom to guide me. Together, we can change the very fabric of this land." Kofi hesitated, his heart heavy. This was a path he had not expected to walk, and yet it seemed the only way forward. He did not trust Amari's intentions, but he also felt an undeniable pull to help the man. It was a decision that would shape not only their destinies, but the fate of the land itself. The next morning, Kofi began his work with Amari. They delved deep into the ancient rituals of the land, speaking with the spirits that inhabited the earth and the skies. Kofi felt a strange energy in the air as they performed their rites, an energy that seemed to thrum with power, yet carried with it an underlying sense of danger. The spirits were powerful, yes, but they were also unpredictable, and Kofi knew that Amari was not fully prepared to understand the forces he was tampering with. As the days passed, Kofi began to notice changes. The air around the mansion grew heavier, the workers more somber. The land, once full of life, began to wither. The trees lost their leaves, and the crops that had flourished for so long started to die. Kofi could feel the imbalance growing, and with each passing day, the cost of Amari's pursuit of power became clearer. But Amari, blinded by his desire for control, refused to see the consequences. His ambition had consumed him, and now it was beginning to consume everything around him. The spirits, once kind and generous, had turned angry, their whispers growing louder with each passing night. One evening, as Kofi stood outside the mansion, gazing at the darkening sky, a voice whispered on the wind, an ancient voice, familiar yet distant. It was the voice of the spirit of the land, the one who had watched over these lands for centuries. "Kofi, you have walked into a web of greed and pride. You cannot save this man, for his heart is as hard as stone. But there is something you can do. You must decide, will you allow the world to be destroyed by one man's ambition, or will you take a stand and restore balance to the land?" Kofi's heart sank. The choice was clear, but the cost would be great. He had entered this world with a simple heart, but now he would have to confront forces far beyond anything he had ever known. And as the wind howled around him, Kofi knew that his next steps would determine not only his fate, but the fate of everything he had ever known. The days that followed were filled with tension. Kofi watched as Amari's obsession with power grew stronger, his greed transforming him into a shadow of the man he had once been. The estate, once full of life and promise, was now suffocated by a heavy air of unease. The crops withered under an unnatural sky, and the workers' faces grew more haggard with every day. Kofi's spirit, too, felt the weight of the curse that was slowly descending upon the land. One evening, as Kofi walked along the now silent fields, a sudden realization gripped him. He could no longer stand by and watch this destruction unfold. The power that Amari had tapped into was far too dangerous, and Kofi knew that if the spirits were left unchecked, there would be nothing left to save. The land would be cursed, and Amari's pursuit of wealth and power would lead to his downfall, and the downfall of all who surrounded him. But the truth was even more sinister than Kofi had imagined. As he meditated on the spirit's words, he began to see a hidden truth within Amari's greed. The businessman had not only sought to control the spirits and the land, but had also made a dark pact, a deal with a trickster spirit, one who had been locked away for centuries. It was this spirit, this ancient trickster, who had whispered into Amari's ear, pushing him toward his obsession. The trickster had promised him everything: wealth, power, control. But all it would require in return was the soul of someone pure-hearted. Kofi's heart froze as the truth settled in. He, the poor beggar, had been the one the trickster sought. It was his wisdom, his purity, that had drawn the trickster's attention. The spirit had known all along that Kofi's heart would be the price for Amari's success. And now, as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place, Kofi knew he had to make a choice. Sacrifice his soul and become a mere pawn in the trickster's game, or confront the evil forces that had threatened to unravel the very fabric of the land. In the dead of night, Kofi returned to the mansion, his mind set. He would confront Amari. He could no longer allow the businessman to make decisions that would destroy everything Kofi had ever known. The mansion was silent as Kofi stepped inside. The grand hall, once filled with laughter and music, was now eerily still. He walked through the corridors, guided only by the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the windows. He found Amari in his study, staring at a map of the estate, his face illuminated by the flickering light of a candle. "You've come," Amari said, his voice distant, as if he had been expecting Kofi. His eyes were wide, almost manic, as he turned to face the beggar. "You know what I've done. You know what I've made of myself, and you understand why I must continue, why I must have it all. I will not stop, Kofi. You understand that, don't you?" Kofi stood in the doorway, his expression solemn. "I understand, Amari, but you must stop. The spirits, the land, everything you have built, it's all falling apart because of your greed. You have made a pact with the trickster spirit, and now it is time to face the consequences of your actions." Amari's eyes flashed with anger. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see the damage around me? But I don't care, Kofi. I will not let go of what I've worked for. You are the one who doesn't understand. You are the one who is weak. You with your empty hands and your empty heart. The world does not care for your wisdom. It cares for power." Kofi stepped forward, his voice calm yet filled with strength. "It is you who do not understand, Amari. The world does not bend to those who seek to control it. The more you try to grasp, the more it slips through your fingers. I have lived my life with nothing, yet I have everything. I have no need for wealth, for power, but your heart has become hollow, and no amount of gold can fill it." As Kofi spoke, a soft wind began to stir. The air around them shifted, and the faint sound of drums echoed in the distance. The trickster spirit, sensing the confrontation, began to reveal itself.
A shadowy figure appeared before them, its eyes glowing with a mischievous light. It was Anansi, the great trickster, woven from the very threads of deception and mischief. "Ah, the beggar and the businessman!" Anansi's voice slithered, rich with amusement. "You both think you understand the game, but you are nothing but pawns. I offered him power, and he took it. Now the soul of the beggar will be mine, and nothing can stop me." Amari's eyes widened in terror as he realized the truth. No, I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted everything." Anansi's laughter echoed in the room. "Wanting is the root of all destruction, Amari, but you will learn that too late." With a sudden motion, Anansi reached out to seize Kofi's soul, but Kofi stood firm. He remembered the ancient wisdom passed down through his ancestors, the lesson that had guided him through life. "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers," Kofi said quietly, his voice steady. "You can take everything from me, but you will never own my spirit." The trickster paused, as if the words had struck a chord. Then, with a sly grin, Anansi vanished into the shadows, leaving only a faint echo of his laughter in the air. Kofi turned to Amari, who was now trembling, his once proud posture broken. "You have a chance, Amari," Kofi said, his voice gentle but firm. "The power you sought will never bring you peace, but there is still time for you to restore balance to this land. You must renounce the pact with the trickster. You must choose wisdom over power." Amari fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I have lost everything, Kofi. What do I have left?" "You have yourself," Kofi replied, extending a hand to the broken man. "And you still have a chance to make things right." Amari looked up at Kofi, his expression filled with both regret and hope. And for the first time, he saw not the beggar, but the man who had shown him the true meaning of wealth.
Kofi's voice was soft, yet firm. "It is not too late, Amari. You must make the choice, not just for yourself, but for everyone. Renounce your pact with the trickster. The spirits will not forgive your betrayal, but they will honor your repentance." Amari slowly raised his head, meeting Kofi's gaze. There was a moment of silence, an eternity in which the weight of his choices seemed to hang in the air like the stillness before a storm. Finally, he nodded. "I am sorry," he whispered, more to himself than to Kofi. "I was blinded by my desire for power. I didn't realize what I had become." The ground beneath them rumbled, a low hum of energy, and the air thickened. It was as if the land itself was watching, waiting. Kofi stepped forward and placed a hand on Amari's shoulder, steadying him. "The spirits are listening, Amari. Speak from your heart." Amari closed his eyes, his hands shaking as he lifted them to the heavens. "Spirits of this land, hear me. I have wronged you. I have broken the sacred balance for my own selfish gain. I renounce my pact with the trickster spirit, Anansi. I seek your forgiveness. I vow to restore the harmony that I have destroyed." As Amari spoke, the air grew still, and the earth trembled slightly beneath their feet. A crackling energy filled the space, and slowly, from the shadows, Anansi appeared once more. The trickster's eyes gleamed with mischief, but now there was an edge of displeasure in them, as if he had not expected such a turn of events. "Ah, so you've come to your senses, have you?" Anansi's voice was as smooth as silk, but beneath it lay a growing anger.
You think you can just undo the deal, the power I gave you? I have waited for centuries for a soul like yours, and you would turn away from it. Kofi stepped forward, his voice unwavering. Power gained through deceit and trickery never lasts, Anansi. The spirits do not play games with those who seek to control them. You, who have woven lies and deception, will now face the consequences of your mischief. Anansi sneered, but for a moment, the air grew colder. The trickster spirit's form began to flicker, shifting like smoke in the wind. The power he had once held so firmly in his grasp was slipping away. I will not be forgotten, old beggar, Anansi hissed, his shape growing more translucent by the second. But I will leave now. The winds of change are not in my favor today. With a final flicker of light and shadow, Anansi vanished, his laughter echoing faintly in the distance like a memory slowly fading away. As the last remnants of Anansi's presence faded, the land around them began to shift. The crops that had withered began to stir, their leaves turning green once more. The sky, which had been darkened by the spirit's anger, cleared, revealing the stars that had been hidden for so long. The winds changed direction, bringing a fresh, rejuvenating breeze across the land. The workers, who had once moved like ghosts, now looked up, their faces lighting with hope and energy. Amari sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The weight of his actions, the realization of how close he had come to destroying everything, was too much to bear. He had lost everything, his wealth, his power, but in doing so, he had gained something more precious than gold: redemption. Kofi knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You have begun the journey back to peace, Amari. You have broken free of the chains that bound you. Amari looked up at Kofi, his eyes filled with gratitude and awe. I have nothing left, Kofi. I've lost everything, and yet I feel as if I've gained something greater than I ever had. Kofi smiled softly. True wealth is not in what you own, but in what you give. You have been given a second chance. Use it wisely. As the sun began to set behind the hills, casting a warm golden glow across the land, Kofi stood up and turned to leave. His work here was done, and the land was healing once again. The spirits had been appeased, and balance had been restored. But before he walked away, Amari called out to him. Kofi, he said, his voice filled with reverence, where will you go now? Kofi turned, his eyes filled with kindness and understanding. I will go where I am needed, my friend, for I am just a beggar, and I have nothing to offer but my wisdom. But wisdom, like a seed, can grow wherever it is planted. And with that, Kofi turned and walked away, disappearing into the horizon as the village slowly began to awaken once more. As the story of the beggar and the businessman spread across the land, people spoke not of wealth or power, but of the lesson they had learned. They spoke of the true meaning of wealth, the power of humility, and the importance of choosing wisdom over ambition. And as the years passed, Kofi's name became synonymous with wisdom, and his story, a tale of redemption, humility, and the eternal battle between greed and grace, became a legend that echoed through the ages.